The French anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss famously said, "The wise man doesn't give the right answers, he asks the right questions." In high school, you've probably gotten used to questions being asked for you, for essay prompts by your teacher, or on standardized tests by a mysterious stranger you've never laid eyes on. The questions teachers ask for you are intended to set you on a meaningful path of inquiry and guide your thinking. But as you get more advanced, those training wheels fall away and you're expected instead to find your own meaningful path of inquiry. If you're new to this channel, my name is Lusia Zaitseva and I teach writing at Harvard University. I'm also the founder of IvyWrite. And in today's video, I'm breaking down the 6 things you need to know to make your writing more enjoyable and productive, both for yourself and for your reader. Before we get started, remember that an analytical question is a tool to guide your thinking. It frames whatever you're doing in a given piece of writing. If you're trying to answer a specific, well-defined question, you're less likely to get distracted by interesting facts, evidence, and analysis that don't directly advance the goal of answering that question. Like a picture frame, an analytical question establishes what is in scope and what is out of scope, so you can focus on a finite, manageable task. A bad question is pretty much guaranteed to generate a boring, flawed, vague, or otherwise non-meaningful answer. For example, if you ask a question like, how is avocado toast at fault for millennials being less financially well off than their parents' generation, you are automatically discounting that there may be other forces at play, like, for example, the increasing and crushing cost of higher education. Ow! An analytical question is also a really useful tool for your readers. If we know what it is you're trying to figure out, we're much more likely to want to stick around long enough for you to actually roll out the answer. And that's important because unlike in a class, in real life, people aren't paid to read your work. And if you bore them or they don't know why they're reading it from the get-go, they're never going to get past the first sentence or the first paragraph. Okay, so now that we've established that analytical questions are really important tools for both you and your reader, let's talk about the 6 things you need to know to ask a really good one. Number 6 might seem really obvious, but your question has to actually be worth finding an answer to. If someone asked you, who cares, you've got to have a better answer than just, what do you mean who cares? I stayed up until 5 in the morning to write this. Number 5, if your question genuinely has stakes, if it's worth asking, then it probably doesn't have an obvious answer, and that's a really good thing. Take this example from a made-up essay about science fiction writer Brian Aldiss's short story, Super Toys Last All Summer Long. You might be familiar with it from the movie adaptation. The story is about a robot boy named David and his human mother, Monica. And in the story, the narrator dips in and out of each of their perspectives so that we, the reader, sees what each of them is thinking. So a question I might ask about this text is, why does the narrator choose to reveal to the reader both what David and Monica are thinking? This is a really good question, if I do say so myself, because it's super interesting the way that the narrator gets us to really sympathize with this being who actually isn't real. And at the same time, by showing us Monica's perspective, he makes us think about what it means to be human and contemplate why this child, who looks and acts and seems like a real child, isn't actually enough. The question I cited a moment ago would work really well if you're doing a close analysis of a single text. If you're writing a research paper, then there are some other considerations. For example, in a research paper, if the answer to your analytical question is just something that other people know, even if it's new to you, you need to find a better question. In other words, a question like, what solutions have been proposed to combat climate change, is not a good analytical question because you might need to learn the answer, but other people already know it. What it is a great stepping stone so you can find out the answer and get to your actual question, which will be about something more specific, maybe about one of the proposals. Which brings us to our 4th most important point. Your question has to be based on a solid understanding of whatever it is you're writing about. If you're writing about someone else's argument, you have to actually understand it well enough so that some reader isn't going to say, well, duh, she addresses that on page 59. If you start with a solid understanding of the facts that are known about whatever it is you're writing about, you're a lot more likely to get to a genuine question that's worth asking. That might seem really daunting because the sum of human knowledge is vast, and how on earth are you ever supposed to be responsible for it? So stay tuned till the end of this video and I'll address this point head on. For now though, this brings us to the second and third most important points about asking a good analytical question. Your question has to actually have an answer, and it has to be answerable with the sources and in the time that you have available to you. If you think about it, you're not going to be able to answer a question like, what do women's clothing say about their changing social status throughout time in 5 pages? And you wouldn't write a master's thesis trying to answer the question, what does Phoebe Dynevor's neck acting say about her character?
Indeed.
Also, if you're being asked to work with just one source, or a small predefined set of sources, but you find yourself not needing that source or needing way more sources, then your question might be a great one, but you can't do it justice, and there's a fundamental mismatch between the problem and the toolkit. Okay, this brings us to the single most important thing about your analytical question. It has to be an actual, honest-to-God, no-holds-barred question. If you already know the answer, then why on earth are you asking it? That's kind of like sitting around in the parking lot after you've gotten your driver's license when you should be driving around and exploring new places.
Get in, loser, we're going shopping.
And the answer to your question, of course, will be your thesis. A final bonus tip for those of you who stuck around this long. I mentioned in tip number 4 that your analytical question has to be based in a solid understanding of the facts. But that doesn't mean that you're responsible for the vast sum of human knowledge, unless, of course, you're setting out to get a PhD. In college, it's very much assumed that you aren't. What's typically enough in that case is that you've done your basic due diligence with the sources that you have found in the time available to you, and you've come to your own original conclusions, even if they're not completely original to the world. It still matters that you do this because you're training yourself in the thinking and habits of mind that you'll need to eventually contribute something new to a conversation, should you choose to. Have you tried writing with your own analytical question? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like, and remember to subscribe to my channel so you know when I come out with the next one. See you then!